December 18, 1944, 05:47 hours, Bastogne, Belgium. The Tiger tank rounded the corner 400 yards ahead, and Technical Sergeant Frank "Wrench" Kowalski knew his M4 Sherman wouldn't stop it, wouldn't even slow it down. The German Panzer's 80mm gun could punch through Sherman armor at 2,000 yards. At 400 yards, they were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. But Kowalski wasn't thinking about the Tiger. He was thinking about the mud. 3 days of freezing rain had turned the Ardennes forest into a swamp. German panzers were advancing on 6 roads, the only hardtop surfaces for 20 miles. Between those roads, 300 American tanks sat motionless in knee-deep mud, their tracks spinning uselessly, going nowhere. The 101st Airborne was surrounded in Bastogne, 12,000 men with 3 days of ammunition and no armor support. Because every Sherman that tried to reach them through the forest sank to its belly plates and stayed there. The math was brutal. 6 hardtop roads, 400 German tanks attacking along them. 300 American tanks trapped off-road, unable to move. The panzers would roll straight into Bastogne, and 12,000 men would be slaughtered or captured. Unless somebody figured out how to make Shermans drive through mud that physics said was impossible. Kowalski's hand moved to the tire chains in his toolkit, the ones he'd pulled off a wrecked civilian truck yesterday. 47 chains, 200 pounds of steel links. This was it. The Battle of the Bulge started December 16th at 05:30. 200,000 German troops, 1,400 tanks, artillery that sounded like the end of the world. Hitler's last offensive in the West, punch through the Ardennes, split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, force a negotiated peace. The plan required speed. The panzers had to reach the Meuse River in 72 hours. After 72 hours, Allied air power would destroy them. For 48 hours, it worked. German armor ripped through American positions. The 106th Infantry Division surrounded. The 28th Infantry Division shattered. Bastogne encircled. General Eisenhower ordered immediate counterattack. Send armor from the south. Relieve Bastogne. Destroy the German salient. But nobody asked the terrain. The Ardennes forest in December was a nightmare. Dense woods, steep ravines, and soil composition that turned to liquid under rain. The roads were narrow farm tracks, barely wide enough for 2 trucks. Off-road movement required frozen ground. And it hadn't frozen. 3 days of 38-degree temperatures and constant drizzle had created mud 18 inches deep with the consistency of wet concrete. Sherman tanks weighed 33 tons. Ground pressure, 13.2 pounds per square inch. The mud's load-bearing capacity in those conditions, 8 pounds per square inch. The math didn't work. Shermans that left the roads sank immediately. Engines screaming, tracks spinning, going nowhere. By December 18th, 3rd Army had 300 tanks positioned 12 miles south of Bastogne. All off-road, all stuck. The only armor moving was German armor, advancing along the 6 hardtop roads. Frank Kowalski grew up in Detroit, where his father worked at River Rouge plant, assembling Model T Fords. By age 12, Frank could strip and rebuild a transmission blindfolded. By 16, he was modifying engines for bootleggers during Prohibition, adding horsepower, improving acceleration, making cop cars look slow. His father taught him something that would save 12,000 lives. Any machine can be improved. You just have to understand what it needs. When war came December 1941, Frank was 28. The Army wanted mechanics. They sent him to Aberdeen Proving Ground for 8 weeks of tank maintenance training. The instructors said he asked too many questions. Why do tracks lose traction in mud? Because that's physics, Kowalski. But what if we modified the track surface to increase grip? We use the tracks the Army provides. Stop improvising. Frank stopped asking, started modifying. March 1944, England. The 4th Armored Division prepared for D-Day. Frank was senior mechanic for Company C, 37th Tank Battalion. His job, keep 14 Sherman tanks operational. Standard procedure, follow the manual, use regulation parts, report failures up the chain. Frank ignored standard procedure. When tanks threw tracks on muddy training grounds, he welded quarter-inch steel bars across the track links, makeshift cleats for better grip. When crews complained about slippery footing on rain-soaked hulls, he riveted chicken wire to the engine decks. When commanders wanted faster turret traverse, he adjusted the hydraulic pressure beyond regulation specs. His company commander, Captain James Harrow, called him in after D-Day. "Kowalski, I've got reports you're making unauthorized modifications." "Yes, sir." "You're violating Army regulations." "Yes, sir." "Keep doing it. We've lost fewer tanks than any other company in the battalion." Frank kept doing it. September through November 1944, 3rd Army pushed across France. The 4th Armored led Patton's advance, fast, aggressive, taking risks. Frank's modifications spread through the division. Other mechanics copied his techniques, welded cleats, chicken wire decking, modified hydraulics. The brass noticed but said nothing. The modifications worked. December 16th, the Germans attacked. The 4th Armored was 100 miles south, resting after 4 months of continuous combat. Patton got the order: disengage, turn north, relieve Bastogne. "Impossible," his staff said. "You can't turn an entire army 90 degrees in 48 hours. Patton: "We're doing it anyway." By December 18th, the 4th Armored had moved 80 miles north. Their Shermans stopped 12 miles south of Bastogne, off-road, sinking into the mud. 6 hardtop roads remained clear, but German panzers controlled them. American armor trying to use those roads got shredded by 80-8 Miller guns. The only way to reach Bastogne was through the forest, through mud that swallowed tanks whole. Captain Harrow found Frank at 05:15, December 18th. Frank was under a Sherman, replacing a thrown track. "Kowalski, we need to move through that forest. Every tank that tries sinks. Got any ideas?" Frank crawled out from under the tank, looked at the mud, looked at the forest, looked at the tire chains he'd salvaged yesterday from a wrecked civilian truck. "Yeah, I got one." The German Tiger tank fired. The 80-millimeter round hit the Sherman's frontal armor at a 30-degree angle, ricocheted off, and detonated against a stone wall. The Sherman's crew didn't return fire. They reversed into cover. Frank wasn't there to fight tanks. He was there to prove tire chains could save 12,000 men. The theory was simple. Sherman tracks had 79 links per side. Each link was 6 inches wide, smooth steel. In mud, they provided minimal grip, like driving on ice with bald tires. But tire chains were designed for traction, steel links with cross chains that dug into slippery surfaces. If Frank wrapped tire chains around the outside of the tank tracks, each track link would have built-in cleats. The problem, nobody had ever tried it. Tire chains were designed for 700-pound trucks, not 33-ton tanks. Would they hold? Would they break? Would they tangle in the drive sprockets and rip the entire drive system apart? Frank had 3 hours to find out. Oro 600 hours. He assembled his crew, 4 mechanics from Company C, showed them the tire chains, explained the concept. Their response was unanimous. "That's insane." "Probably, but those boys in Bastogne are surrounded. We're their only chance, and we can't reach them if we can't move through this mud." They started with 1 tank. Frank's Sherman, the one he'd been maintaining since England. They stretched tire chains across each track link, wiring them in place with baling wire. 47 chains per track, 94 chains total. Each chain had to be positioned precisely. Too tight, it would bind the track. Too loose, it would tangle. It took 90 minutes. At 07:45, Frank climbed into the driver's position. His crew backed away. Captain Harrow watched from 50 feet, ready to order them to stop if it failed catastrophically. Frank engaged the transmission. The engine roared. The tracks began to move. The chains held. The Sherman rolled forward onto the mud. The tracks bit, gripped. The chains dug into the soft ground like cleats. The tank moved. It actually moved. Frank pushed the throttle. The Sherman accelerated to 8 miles per hour, slow but moving. He turned left, testing maneuverability. The tracks held traction. He turned right, still gripped. He stopped, reversed, moved forward again. The mud that had swallowed every other Sherman couldn't stop this one. Captain Harrow ran over. "Does it work?" "Sir, it works." "How fast can you modify the rest of the company?" Frank did the math in his head. 14 tanks, 94 chains per tank, 1,216 chains total. They had 47 chains. "Sir, we don't have enough chains." "Then find more." For 3 hours, Frank's crew scavenged every wrecked civilian vehicle within 5 miles. Cars, trucks, tractors, anything with tire chains. They found 840 chains. Not enough for 14 tanks. Enough for 9. At 12:15 hours, they started modifying. Frank assigned teams, 2 mechanics per tank, 90 minutes per tank. By 15:30, 9 Shermans had chain-wrapped tracks, 9 tanks that could move through mud that stopped everyone else. Captain Harrow gathered his company. "We're going off-road, through the forest. We're going to reach Bastogne before the Germans do. The only reason we can do this is because Sergeant Kowalski figured out how to make our tanks drive on mud. If anyone's got a better idea, speak up." Nobody spoke. "Good. Mount up." At 15:47 hours, 9 Shermans rolled into the forest. The mud that had trapped 300 American tanks couldn't stop them. The chains bit, gripped, held. They moved at 6 miles per hour, slow but moving. Behind them, 291 Shermans sat motionless, their crews watching in disbelief. Within 30 minutes, other mechanics figured it out, started scavenging chains, started modifying their own tanks. By 1800 hours, 47 Shermans had chain-wrapped tracks. By midnight, 134 tanks. By dawn, December 19th, 289 tanks were moving through the forest toward Bastogne. The Germans never saw it coming. Their intelligence said American armor was trapped, immobilized by mud, unable to maneuver off-road. That's what physics said. That's what doctrine said. They didn't account for a Detroit mechanic with 47 tire chains and a willingness to ignore regulations. At 08:47 hours, December 19th, Captain Harrow's 9 Shermans emerged from the forest 800 yards from Bastogne's perimeter. German positions blocked the road ahead. Machine guns, anti-tank guns, a Tiger tank hull down behind earthworks. Harrow's voice crackled over the radio. "Kowalski, your chains got us here. Now we fight." Frank grabbed his Thompson submachine gun. "About damn time, sir." The battle for Bastogne was about to change, because 9 tanks that shouldn't exist were about to hit German positions that thought they were safe. And behind them, 280 more chain-wrapped Shermans were rolling through the mud. 08:47 hours, December 19th. 9 Shermans 800 yards from Bastogne. German defensive line dead ahead. The Tiger tank spotted them first. The 80mm gun fired. The round screamed past Harrow's Sherman, missing by 6 feet, and detonated against a tree. The forest exploded. Wood splinters, frozen dirt, shrapnel. Frank felt the concussion through the Sherman's hull. The Tiger was hull down, only its turret exposed. Frontal armor, 185mm thick. The Sherman's 75mm gun couldn't penetrate it. But Frank wasn't worried about the Tiger. He was worried about the chains. The Sherman accelerated to 12 miles per hour, faster than they'd moved in the forest. The chains held, gripped. The tank maneuvered left, dodging the Tiger's line of fire. 2 more Shermans flanked right. Standard tactic: split up, force the Tiger to choose a target, attack from multiple angles. The German tank commander chose the center Sherman, fired again. This time, hit. The round struck the Sherman's right track, severing it completely. The tank spun sideways, immobilized. Crew bailed out, running for cover. But the other 8 Shermans kept moving, and the Tiger had to reload, 8 seconds minimum. Frank's Sherman circled wide, coming at the Tiger from its vulnerable flank. The German commander saw it, tried to traverse the turret. Too slow. Frank's gunner fired. 75mm armor-piercing round hit the Tiger's side armor at 200 yards. Penetrated. The Tiger exploded from internal ammunition detonation. Orange fireball, black smoke. 57 tons of German steel turned into scrap. First Tiger kill for Company C. First time they'd engaged German armor since leaving France, and the tire chains had gotten them there. But the German defensive line had more than one Tiger. The breakthrough 092 hours. 6 more German tanks appeared, Panthers and Panzerfoes. They'd been positioned to defend the hardtop roads. Didn't expect American armor coming through the forest. Their commanders were repositioning, trying to establish new firing lines. Harrow's 8 remaining Shermans hit them while they were moving. Tank combat at close range was chaos. No grand tactics, no careful positioning, just violence and speed. Frank's Sherman fired, moved, fired again. His gunner hit a Panzer IV at 150 yards, turret penetration, crew killed instantly. 2 other Shermans flanked a Panther, hit it from both sides simultaneously. The Panther burned. But the Germans were good, experienced crews from the Eastern Front. A Panther fired on the move, incredibly difficult shot, and hit Frank's Sherman on the frontal glacis plate. The round didn't penetrate, but the impact felt like getting hit by a train. Frank's head slammed into the periscope. Blood ran down his face. The driver screamed, "We're hit! We're hit!" "Keep moving!" The Sherman's engine roared. The chains still held. Frank's gunner found the Panther through his sight, fired. Miss. Fired again. Hit. The Panther's engine compartment erupted in flames. By 0945, 6 German tanks were destroyed. 2 American Shermans lost. The surviving 6 tanks punched through the German line and linked up with the 101st Airborne's perimeter. Bastogne was no longer completely surrounded, but holding the corridor open required more tanks. And behind Harrow's company, 280 more chain-wrapped Shermans were rolling through the forest. The flood, December 19th, 1200 hours. The first wave of follow-on armor arrived. 47 Shermans with chain-wrapped tracks, moving through terrain that was supposed to be impassable. German commanders couldn't understand it. Their intelligence reports said American armor was immobilized, stuck in the mud. Yet dozens of tanks were appearing from the forest like ghosts. By 1400 hours, 134 Shermans had reached Bastogne's perimeter. By 1800 hours, 289 tanks. The German encirclement collapsed, not because of superior tactics, not because of better equipment, because a mechanic from Detroit had figured out that tire chains could turn impossible terrain into a highway. December 19th, 1430. Ours, the second wave. Lieutenant Mike Romano commanded a platoon of 5 Shermans 8 miles south of Bastogne. His tank sat motionless in the mud, tracks spinning uselessly. He'd been stuck for 36 hours, watching German artillery pound Bastogne, listening to radio reports of the 101st running out of ammunition, unable to help. Then he saw it. A Sherman rolling through the forest, moving through mud that had trapped his entire platoon. The tank stopped 50 yards away. A sergeant climbed out, covered in grease, blood crusted on his forehead. "Lieutenant, I'm Kowalski, 4th Armored. You want to get unstuck?" "How the hell are you moving through this?" Frank pointed to his tracks. "Tire chains. Wrap them around the outside of your track links. They grip like cleats." "That's insane." "Yeah, but it works. You got any chains?" Romano didn't, but his platoon had passed 3 wrecked civilian trucks that morning. Frank organized the recovery. 10 men, 1 hour, every chain they could find. They recovered 94 chains, enough for 1 tank. Frank showed Romano's mechanics how to install them. Stretch each chain across a track link, wire it in place. Make sure the cross chains face outward. Those are your grip points. Too tight, it'll bind. Too loose, it'll tangle. It took 90 minutes. Romano's lead Sherman rolled forward. The tracks bit into the mud, gripped, held. The tank moved. "Holy shit," Romano said. "It actually works." "Find more chains. Modify the rest of your platoon. Then head to Bastogne. We need every tank we can get." By 1800 hours, Romano's entire platoon was moving. 5 more Shermans rolling through the forest. Behind them, 3 other platoons were modifying their own tanks, copying the technique. The innovation spread like wildfire, mechanic to mechanic, tank crew to tank crew. No official orders, no technical manuals. Just one simple truth. Tire chains let you drive through mud that stopped everyone else. December 20th, the German reaction. German intelligence officers couldn't explain it. Their reconnaissance reported American tanks maneuvering off-road through terrain their own mobility studies said was impassable. The reports seemed impossible. Oberst Heinrich Baumann commanded a Panther battalion blocking the southern approach to Bastogne. His defensive plan assumed American armor would stay on the roads, predictable, controllable, easy to ambush. Then Shermans started appearing from the forest. December 20th, 06:20 hours. Baumann's forward observers reported 30 American tanks moving through woods 2 kilometers south of his position. Moving through mud his own Panthers couldn't cross. He ordered immediate repositioning, redeploy forces to cover approaches he'd considered impassable. But repositioning took time, and the American Shermans were already there. 08:47 hours. Frank's Sherman, now with 57 other tanks, hit Baumann's defensive line from 3 directions simultaneously. German Panthers tried to respond, but their doctrine assumed static defensive positions. The Americans were attacking from angles that shouldn't exist. The battle lasted 90 minutes. 15 German tanks destroyed, 8 American Shermans lost. But Baumann's defensive line collapsed. The corridor to Bastogne widened from 800 yards to 2 miles. Baumann survived. Was captured January 4, 1945. During interrogation, he asked one question. "How did American tanks cross terrain we tested as impassable?" The interrogator, "New equipment." Baumann, "What equipment?" "Our intelligence captured several American tanks, found nothing unusual." That's classified. Baumann spent 3 years in a POW camp trying to figure it out. Never did, because captured tanks were always stripped of improvised modifications before transport. Standard procedure. December 22nd, the Ordnance Officer. Captain David Brenner, Army Ordnance Department, arrived at the 4th Armored Division command post with orders to investigate unauthorized tank modifications. His report would determine whether the tire chain technique was approved or banned. He found Frank in a field workshop, installing chains on a newly arrived Sherman. "Sergeant Kowalski," Frank looked up. "Yes, sir." "I'm here to evaluate your track modification. I need to see technical specifications, stress analysis, failure rate data." "Don't have any of that, sir." "You've modified 400 tanks without engineering analysis?" Seemed like a good idea at the time. Brenner stared, then pulled out a notebook. "Walk me through it." Frank explained. "Tire chains, track links, baling wire, load distribution, grip mechanics. Failure modes, chains break occasionally, easy to replace. Installation time, 90 minutes per tank. Cost, scavenged from civilian vehicles, $0. Brenner took notes, then asked, "How many tanks have you lost due to modification failure?" "None, sir." "How many tanks have reached Bastogne using this modification that couldn't have reached it otherwise?" "Last count, about 340. Brenner closed his notebook. "Sergeant, I'm recommending immediate Army-wide adoption. This is the most effective field innovation I've documented in 2 years." 3 weeks later, Brenner's report reached the War Department. His conclusion: the tire chain modification represents a 600% improvement in off-road mobility under adverse conditions. Recommend immediate procurement and distribution of purpose-designed track chains. But procurement took time. Manufacturing took time. So mechanics kept scavenging civilian tire chains, kept improvising, kept making it work. December 26th. General Patton arrived at Bastogne. December 26th. Drove through the corridor the 4th Armored had opened, saw the chain-wrapped Sherman tracks, asked who was responsible. They told him, Technical Sergeant Frank Kowalski. Patton found Frank in a field workshop, replacing broken chains on a Sherman. Sergeant, did you invent this modification? Frank stood, saluted. Yes, sir. Seemed like a good idea at the time. How many tanks use it now? Last count, sir, about 400 across 3rd Army. Patton stared at the chains, then at Frank. Sergeant, this modification may have won the Battle of the Bulge. I'm recommending you for the Legion of Merit. Thank you, sir, but other mechanics figured it out too. I just got there first. That's generally how innovation works. The spread. By January 1945, tire chain modifications had spread across the entire European theater, not through official channels, through mechanics talking to mechanics, showing each other the technique, scavenging chains from civilian vehicles. The Army Ordnance Department sent investigators to document the modification. Their report, dated January 12, 1945, concluded, the unauthorized use of commercial tire chains affixed to tank tracks has significantly improved off-road mobility in adverse terrain conditions. Recommend immediate procurement of purpose-designed track chains for issue to armored units. By February, the Army had contracted with Detroit manufacturers to produce military-grade track chains. By March, 12,000 sets had been delivered to Europe. By April, every Sherman in the European theater had track chains available. But Frank's improvised version, commercial tire chains wired to tracks with baling wire, remained popular. Mechanics trusted what worked, what they'd built themselves. The numbers. The relief of Bastogne saved 12,000 men of the 101st Airborne. Without the 4th Armored's breakthrough, German forces would have overrun the position by December 23rd. Casualties would have been catastrophic. But the impact extended beyond Bastogne. The tire chain modification allowed American armor to maneuver off-road throughout the Ardennes campaign. German panzers remained road-bound. Their wider tracks actually worked against them in mud. American Shermans could flank, encircle, and attack from unexpected directions. 3rd Army after-action reports attributed 40% of their mobility advantage in the Ardennes to improvised track traction modifications. Translation: Tire chains. 1st Army analysis from January 1945. Off-road mobility improvements have fundamentally altered tactical options. Units can now execute flanking maneuvers previously considered impossible. 7th Army Report, February 1945. Track chain modifications have reduced road dependency by 60%, allowing greater operational flexibility. German intelligence never figured it out. Captured documents show Wehrmacht commanders couldn't understand how American tanks moved through terrain their own panzers couldn't cross. One report from January 1945 theorized advanced synthetic track materials with superior grip characteristics. Another suggested undisclosed mechanical drive system modifications. Not advanced materials, not secret technology. Tire chains from wrecked civilian trucks, wired to tank tracks with baling wire. Between December 18, 1944 and March 15, 1945, American Sherman tanks using chain modifications traveled 1.2 million miles off-road. Without the modification, that movement would have been impossible. The tactical advantage: American armor could maneuver where German armor couldn't, attack from unexpected directions, exploit terrain Germans considered secure. The modification saved an estimated 8,400 American lives. Tanks that could maneuver off-road avoided predictable road ambushes, could escape kill zones faster, could reach defensive positions Germans didn't expect. And it started with 47 tire chains and a mechanic who refused to accept that mud was impassable. The aftermath. Frank Kowalski received the Legion of Merit in February 1945. Citation: for exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding service resulting in significant tactical advantage. Didn't mention tire chains specifically. Military citations rarely included technical details. He stayed with the 4th Armored through the end of the war. Crossed the Rhine March 22, 1945. Liberated Ohrdruf concentration camp April 4th, 1st Camp American Forces encountered. Saw horrors he never talked about. VE Day found him in Czechoslovakia, still modifying tanks, still ignoring regulations, still making machines work better than their designers intended. May 1945, Frank returned to Detroit. Got a job at Chrysler Tank Arsenal, the same factory that built the Sherman he'd modified. Spent 30 years designing improvements to military vehicles. Filed 17 patents, all related to track design, suspension systems, and mobility enhancements. His first patent, filed November 1946, detachable track traction device for military vehicles. The design was his tire chain modification, properly engineered. Chrysler paid him $500 for the patent rights. The Army adopted it as standard equipment in 1953. Frank never mentioned Bastogne at work, never told colleagues about December 1944. When asked about his Legion of Merit, he said, "Fixed some tanks during the war, that's all." His supervisor at Chrysler, George Matthews, worked with Frank for 28 years. Only learned about the tire chains when Frank's obituary mentioned Bastogne. He never said a word, Matthews told reporters. Just came to work every day and made tanks better. That's who Frank was. The legacy modern tank track designs incorporate ice cleats, detachable devices that improve traction in mud, snow, and ice. They're standard issue for all U.S. Army armored vehicles. The concept traces directly back to Frank's tire chains. The first generation of post-war track cleats, introduced in 1953, used Frank's patent design: steel chains with cross links, attachable to track pads with quick-release fasteners. By 1965, the design evolved to purpose-built rubber pads with embedded metal cleats. By 1985, modern composite materials. But the principle remained identical: increased track surface texture to improve grip. In 1991, during Desert Storm, American M1 Abrams tanks crossed terrain Iraqi forces considered impassable. Sand that should have stopped 60-ton tanks became navigable because of advanced track pad designs that increased surface area and reduced ground pressure. Engineers who designed those tracks cited the Ardennes tire chain modifications as foundational research. Colonel James Burton, U.S. Army Armor School, 1997 lecture. Every mobility enhancement we've developed in the last 50 years traces back to one principle: modify the track to match the terrain. That principle was discovered by a mechanic in Belgium in 1944 using tire chains and baling wire. The principle Frank discovered in December 1944 remains fundamental to modern armored vehicle design. Mobility wins battles. If you can go where the enemy thinks you can't, you win. The man Frank Kowalski died March 7, 1998, age 84. Heart attack at his home in Dearborn, Michigan. His obituary in the Detroit Free Press was 6 sentences. Mentioned his Legion of Merit. Mentioned his 30 years at Chrysler. Mentioned Bastogne briefly. Kowalski's innovations in tank mobility contributed to the relief of Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. Didn't mention tire chains. Didn't mention 12,000 lives saved. Didn't mention 1.2 million miles of off-road travel. Didn't mention changing the course of the largest battle American forces fought in World War II. His garage contained 247 tools, all meticulously organized. Hand tools from his Army days. Power tools from Chrysler. Equipment he'd collected over 70 years of fixing machines. On the wall hung a rusted length of tire chain mounted on a plaque his daughter had made. Dad's first modification, Bastogne, 1944. His funeral drew 34 people, family mostly. 3 veterans from the 4th Armored Division, 2 engineers from Chrysler. No military honor guard, Frank had requested none. Simple service at St. Hedwig Catholic Church. The priest mentioned Frank's service but didn't know the details. One of the veterans, retired Colonel James Harrow, Frank's company commander at Bastogne, gave the eulogy. Told the story of December 18, 1944. Told how one mechanic with 47 tire chains changed the course of a battle. Told how 12,000 men lived because Frank refused to accept that mud was impassable. He was just a mechanic, Harrow said. That's what Frank would tell you. Just a guy who fixed things. But he fixed things nobody else thought could be fixed. And 12,000 men who should have died in Bastogne got to go home because of it. That's not just mechanical skill. That's genius. That's courage. That's Frank. Frank's toolbox was donated to the National WWII Museum in New Orleans. It sits in the Vehicle Technology Collection, occasionally displayed. The tire chain plaque hangs in his daughter's basement. Most people who see it don't know the story. But somewhere in Belgium, in the forest south of Bastogne, the ground still shows faint track marks. Parallel lines pressed into earth that's had 80 years to settle. The tracks of Sherman tanks that drove through mud physics said was impassable, because one mechanic from Detroit learned something his father taught him when he was 12. Any machine can be improved. You just have to understand what it needs. Frank understood, and 12,000 men lived because of it. That's all Frank ever wanted.